The myth of modern minority. The word modern minority has pretty much circulated my entire life. I think about it a lot, and that's because my parents do subscribe to it. They probably came to this country understanding that this is kind of how a lot of people view Asian Americans as hardworking individuals who do as they're told and follow the rules and have high educational attainment, and we have to follow the mold and assimilate. I was highly impacted by this, and a lot of what I've done, as I grew up was due to this subscription to modern minority myth. I tried to excel in every subject in school. I joined all of the clubs and tried to get leadership positions and everything. I tried really hard in college and tried to get into college of at least my dreams, and at least to make my parents happy. And I think there's this just general sense to do what we need to do to fit in with society. And I think modern minority has created this extra layer of pressure. This pressure has translated to other issues, as Time Magazine has covered. There's this suspicion amongst a lot of, at least I know amongst Chinese American parents, that elite colleges are doing racial quotas and that they're barring certain Asian American students from getting into the Ivy Leagues. And the reason for even this to be of concern in the first place is because if we don't get into the best colleges, then we don't get into the best jobs, and we don't get into like the high socioeconomic standing that our parents believe we have to get to be accepted by society and to live a happy life. For the longest time, I believed in that because I felt like everyone around me probably saw that I was Asian, so I must be good at math. I must be super smart, and I was probably born with an extra 10,000 brain cells, and I was just naturally gifted. And that's kind of how society might perceive me. I find the Harvard case very interesting because I do remember when I told my friend in high school that I got into my dream college, he was like, well, that's because you're Asian though. And I was very naive, probably, that I realized people could be thinking that, but I never heard anyone say it to me. But when my friend told me that, upon me telling him like, oh, well, why don't you try and apply? He's like, well, but you got in because you're Asian. And that definitely hurt because it made me feel like so just because I filled in a different bubble on my application, that's what got me into college. It's a very weird thing to think about. It made me question my achievements, what I've done. Did it matter? A lot of that definitely flowed through my mind when he said it like that. But it was definitely the opposite of what I was thinking because of the different cases that were being brought on the elite colleges at that time. A lot of parents were talking about it, and my parents were concerned that maybe schools weren't accepting people supposedly qualified, and a lot of people were just really concerned. All the parents were very concerned at the time. I never thought of the other way where maybe my classmates thought I got in just because I was Asian. And so that definitely made me question my self-worth, my actual attainment in life. It's very puzzling, to say the least. The other incident in high school, though, was when one of my friend's dad came up to me once, and he was just talking about like how great that like me and all my cousins, because he kind of knew some other people in our family, and he's like, we're all doing so great. And he was just like, man, he used to teach at a high school, and one of the Asian American students there was getting C's, and he was like, in any other occasion he would just not even give it another thought. It would just be a fine student, really. But because she was Asian American, he just felt like she was way dumber than usual. And that really scared me because this reinforces everything my dad has ever told me about how the general American might view us, and that we have to do well, because if we don't, then we are just perceived as just not smart at all. This is not just for the classroom, but like at job interviews, at recruiting events, in the workplace, in considerations for leadership positions or promotions. At any other stage in our life, we could be passed over because we're not smart enough, or we're not as smart as the general population expects of us. And due to this mono-minority myth, I felt extra pressure to overperform. I felt like I had to, because I don't have family connections, and I don't know if I could have fit in corporate culture. And so there's this feeling with my dad, at least, that I have to get the best grades possible to at least be accepted for where my grade was. I was very nervous, especially during recruiting events, and as I went on and interviewed, I was always in the back of my mind, like, if I didn't get the right GPA, would I get passed over for another person that had the same GPA? And it's just over the fact that I don't know, over this bubble that I filled out for race. It made me paralyzed a little. It was hard for me to reach out for help whenever I was struggling with my schoolwork, because I felt like I can't possibly look and appear to be lost in school. How can I struggle with school? Like, that should come so naturally. At least that's what society would expect. And yeah, it was pretty bad. I mean, in high school, I almost like failed a class for just not reaching out. I just let it glide. It was for calc, and I decided to just see if things would just smooth over. It didn't. And after the first semester, I had to sit down with the teacher and my parents and everyone, and we had to figure it out. But it was pretty bad. I let it sit because I didn't know how to reach out for help for math, because how could I possibly struggle with math? The whole world expects us to be so good at math. So it was hard to be subjected to this kind of pressure, to like this mono-minority myth, and to this stereotype that we're supposed to be so smart and so good at everything, especially math. It was pretty tough. But I guess this brings us to the next issue, though, with the mono-minority myth, because the myth part of this is that even though it appears that we're doing super well by a lot of people in terms of looking at college admissions or how companies are recruiting, it looks like we're coming in huge droves. But when you start looking upwards towards C-suites and other just, senior management and execs, we're not there anymore. It's kind of weird. It's not like this mono-minority will push us to get a ton of representation in, board of directors or in, CEOs, CFOs. It's really, we look like we're thriving, but it's just a facade, because we don't necessarily thrive in the later parts of our careers, in the later part of life, when we're no longer talking about this as intently as we did in college or right when we're recruiting. I know a lot of companies are now more focused on retention and advancement of their employees, and ensuring that people feel like they're in a space that is encouraging. But I feel like at the time when I was first starting out, when I was first looking upwards, I didn't really see anyone that looked like me in leadership positions or in the C-suites. That just wasn't something that I saw, and I still don't quite see it, but I know a lot of work is being done with a lot of different types of companies even. I know nonprofit boards are starting to reconsider their engagement with, with diversity and inclusion. And I know a lot of schools are also looking towards that with their own internal leadership. It's not just the students that they're bringing in. So I am very encouraged. I feel very positive towards the future of diversity and inclusion in the higher levels of corporations and schools and other institutions. So I just wanted to bring about kind of how I feel mono-minority has influenced my life. It's just always interesting to hear people say stereotypes that you've heard growing up. When they say it out loud, it feels a lot different than when you just assume people might be feeling it. It is, and it sticks with you. Similar to all the videos I've done, it's just another plea to not throw around the joke that, we're good at math. You never know what kind of extra pressure you're laying down on someone. The hope is to not carry these stereotypes on, and not just Asian stereotypes, any stereotype. Hopefully, as the next generation is being brought up, that you're not passing down this type of stereotype down, because it all starts in the very beginning, whether it's in elementary school or in high school or in the workplace. It's very impactful when people say a certain thing about you that you feel like you really had no control of, where society and institutions are built a certain way that reinforces this mono-minority myth and makes us behave a certain way and pits us against each other. It's very difficult to reconcile and try to be, and just try to be. So yeah, my hope is to not pass it along to the next generation. And yeah, that's my hope. That's all I have for today. I hope you've enjoyed this series. I'm definitely not perfect, and I definitely have more to learn. I hope this is at least just a small glimpse of how I feel about the Stop Asian Hate movement, and how I feel about just my upbringing and how my life has turned out so far with all of this, really. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.